Hey there, and welcome to Authentically ADHD. I'm your host, Carmen, and I am so glad that you're here. This is a podcast where we get real about ADHD. No filters, no judgment, a safe space to explore and learn and grow. If you're here, it's because you want to take a deep dive into the world of ADHD, and trust me, we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. Now, you're probably wondering, why did I start this podcast? Well, in true ADHD fashion, it all started very impulsively. One day, I thought, I should start a podcast, especially with all this paperwork that I have and all these notes that I have trying to understand my own ADHD. And the next thing I knew, here I am, sharing thoughts with you. I don't know, 200, 100 episodes later? I don't know. I lose track of time. I'm time blind. Are you? Anyways, when you have ADHD, ideas come fast, and sometimes you just gotta roll with them. Honestly, this podcast was born out of my passion for understanding ADHD in a deeper way with the newest research. You see, pills don't teach skills. That's something I've learned over the years. Medication can help, and it's a great tool to use, but true growth, that comes from knowledge, understanding, and actionable skills. And so that's what I want to share with you. Research-backed insights, practical tips, and lived experiences of someone who's been there. Now, a little bit about me. I'm not just a host of this podcast. I'm also an early childhood special education teacher, which means I've spent years understanding how children learn, grow, and thrive in ways that work for them, especially when they're neurodiverse. And I'm also a certified life and performance coach, guiding people to unlock their full potential in both their personal and professional lives. But here's the thing that makes me a little different. I'm also a late diagnosed ADHDer. And on top of that, I self-identify as being on the autism spectrum. So when I talk about ADHD, it's not just from a professional perspective, it's from lived experience, because I get it. I know what it's like to feel like your brain is running at full speed while everyone else is moving at a different pace, and you have instructions that are in Japanese and upside down, and everybody else got them in their own language. Throughout this podcast, I'll share all kinds of insights about navigating life with ADHD, from the everyday struggles to the strengths that we can celebrate. We'll talk about everything from time management to relationships to self-advocacy, and all about how to live authentically in a world that often asks us to be anything but. Whether you have ADHD yourself or you want to understand it better, you are in the right place. So, let's get started. Hey there, my ADHD tribe. I have an offer for you. Do you ever feel like you're constantly juggling, but somehow always dropping the ball? You're not alone. We've all been there. I struggle still to manage time, stay organized, and to keep track of the never-ending to-do list. I'm Carmen, and I get it. Trust me, that's why I have created Thriving Authentically with ADHD, Executive Functions and Coping Strategies. It's a course designed to help you take control of your ADHD brain instead of letting it control you. But here's the kicker. It's not just a course. It's a journey. For only $25, you'll get access to about 3 hours of exclusive ADHD-friendly content that breaks down the executive functions in simple terms and explains why your ADHD brain works in the way that it does. And most executive functions, most importantly, it'll teach you practical, research-backed coping strategies that you can start using today. From working memory struggles to time blindness to emotional regulation, we cover it all. Plus, you'll get a workbook in your email packed with interactive exercises to help you reflect on your own ADHD journey, track your progress, and apply what you've learned at your own pace. But that's not all. You also will get 2 personalized coaching sessions where we can dive into your specific challenges and create strategies that work for you. No more one-size-fits-all solutions, just real, authentic, tailored support. And the best part, you get all this for just $25. That's less than a cost of a meal out. Plus, with my proven strategies, you can start improving your executive function skills in no time. Imagine finally understanding your ADHD brain and learning how to thrive and not just survive. Don't wait too long. The spots are limited. Sign up today and let's get started on your journey to thriving authentically with ADHD. Hi, this is a disclaimer that I am a early childhood special education teacher. I am a certified life and performance coach, and I am a podcaster. All right, I am not a medical doctor, and none of this information should be used in supplement of a medical professional and or therapy. Hey there, and welcome back to Authentically ADHD, the podcast where we embrace the chaos and some of the magic of the ADHD brain. I'm Carmen, and today we are diving into a topic that is as complex as my data and filing system, which to say is very to the point where I'm the only one who understands it and I have to explain it to anyone else who is trying to understand it. So this is going to be a little bit of a wild and longer ride because ADHD is very, very common to have co-occurring mood and learning disorders. So fasten your seatbelts. And if you're like me, try not to get distracted by the shiny window view. We are diving into the co-occurring conditions such as anxiety, depression, OCD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and bipolar disorder, all hanging out with ADHD. First of all, I want to talk about why should we cover this? This is because ADHD rarely rides solo. In fact, research compiled by Dr. Russell Barkley finds that over 80% of children and adults with ADHD have at least one other psychiatric disorder, and more than half have two or more coexisting conditions. 2/3 of folks with ADHD have at least one coexisting condition, and often the classic ADHD symptoms, fidgeting, daydreaming, did I leave the stove on moments, can overshadow these other disorders. It's like ADHD is the friend who talks so loud at the party that you don't notice the quieter buddies like anxiety or dyslexia tagging along in the background, making everything a little bit harder. But we're going to notice them today. And with a blend of humor, sass, and some solid neuroscience, yes, we can be funny and scientific, ask me how I know, we will explore how each of these conditions shows up along ADHD. We're going to talk about how they could be misdiagnosed or missed entirely. And most importantly, we're going to dish out some strategies to tell them apart and tackle them both. Knowledge is power, and self-awareness is the key. I have coined that phrase now to be mine. I didn't copyright it or anything, but I'm pretty sure I came up with putting those two together. If I didn't and somebody else did, and that's just from my terrible working memory, please let me know. But seriously, knowledge is power, and self-awareness is the key, especially when it comes to untangling ADHD's web of quirks and comrades and chaos. So, are you ready? Let's get started with ADHD and anxiety. This is like double trouble in overdrive. So this is where we're going to start out. ADHD's frequent and frantic companion, anxiety. Ever had your brain ping pong between I can't focus on this work and I'm so worried I'll mess this up? That's ADHD and anxiety playing tango in your head. It's a double whammy. ADHD makes it very hard to concentrate, and anxiety cranks up the worry about consequences. As one study notes, about 2 in 5 children with ADHD have significant problems with anxiety, and over half the adults with ADHD do as well. In other words, if you have ADHD and you feel like a nervous wreck half the time, you're not alone. You're in very good and jittery company. ADHD and anxiety can look alike on the surface. Both can make you restless, unfocused, and irritable. I mean, is it ADHD distractibility, or am I busy worrying about everything to pay attention? Hint, it can be both. Two things can be true at the same time, especially for women, but I don't want to specify this for women. But ADHD is often the thing that's overlooked and mislabeled as anxiety. Picture a person who can't concentrate in class. If they're constantly daydreaming and fidgety, one teacher calls it ADHD. Another sees a quiet, overwhelmed little student and calls it anxiety. Same behavior, but different labels. Also, same behavior, way different treatment. Let me ask you, what do you think would happen if that one teacher who only saw ADHD and didn't see the anxiety talked to the parents bring to the doctor, and they're put on a stimulant. And that stimulant just so happens to make that student's anxiety go through the roof. Do you think that they're likely to try the non-stimulant? Maybe if they knew that they had both, they would have started with a better treatment. Now, I do not like to be sexist in these particular things, but I am a woman, and women in particular have had their ADHD misdiagnosed as anxiety or mood issues for years. This also happens with men who present with inattentive or combined types, okay? If men internalize their symptoms, it also gets misdiagnosed as anxiety or mood issues for years. Ask me how I know. I have clients. Partially because anxious people tend to internalize symptoms, less hyperactive and more worrier, and that masks the ADHD that's underneath. So, how do we tell them apart? One clue is where the distraction comes from. ADHD is like having 100 TV channels on in your brain and someone else is holding the remote. Your attention just flips on its own. Anxiety, on the other hand, it's like one channel stuck on a horror movie that you hate and are scared of, and you can't focus on anything else because of that worry. Or 10 different worries, like the movie and then 10 other things that you're thinking about, are all running on a loop on repeat. An adult with ADHD might forget a work deadline because, well, ADHD. An adult with anxiety might miss the deadline because they were paralyzed worrying about being perfect. Both end up missing the deadline. Relatable. Ask me how I know, but for different reasons. Neuroscience is starting to unravel this knot, because it's quite a knot, believe me. There's evidence of a genetic link between ADHD and anxiety. The two often run in the same family. In brain studies, both conditions involve irregularities in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's command center for focus and planning, and the limbic system, the emotion center. Essentially, if your brain were a car, ADHD means that the brakes, the inhibition, are very loose. And anxiety means that the alarm system is hypersensitive. So that little light or thing that blinks when you're supposed to brake, like when you're behind somebody with anxiety, that alarm goes off when you're yards behind the person, and it's loud. It's hypersensitive. So combine the loose brakes with the blaring alarm and you get, well, people like us. Fun times, right? So here's an interesting tidbit. Females with ADHD are more likely to report anxiety than males. This does not mean that this is for everybody. Some experts think that this is partially due to underdiagnosed ADHD. You know, that whole ADHD wasn't around when I was a kid. Yes, it was, Karen. Your ADHD people were just institutionalized, okay? It means that many girls grew up being told, and even boys grew up being told, they were just worry warts, when in fact, ADHD was lurking underneath, making everyday life more overwhelming, thus feeding the anxiety. As Dr. Thomas Brown, a top ADHD expert, points out, emotional regulation difficulties like chronic stress or worry are characteristics of ADHD, even though they're not in the official DSM-5 checklist. Our ADHD brains can amplify emotions. So normal worry for someone else, or even someone with anxiety only, becomes a 5-alarm fire for us. Now, action time. How do we manage this dynamic duo? The first step is to get the right diagnosis, like I mentioned before. A clinician should untangle whether symptoms like trouble concentrating are from anxiety, ADHD, or both. They might ask, have you had concentration issues, pointing to the ADHD, or did they start when your anxiety kicked into high gear? Also consider context. ADHD symptoms occur in most settings, school, work, home, etc., while pure anxiety might spike in only specific situations, say social anxiety in crowds, panic attacks only under stress, only related to relationships and home, only related to school, or only related to work. Treatment has to tackle both. Therapy, especially cognitive behavioral therapy, is a rock star here. CBT can teach you skills to manage that worry. Hello, deep breathing and logical rebuttals to the what-if thoughts. And it can also help with ADHD organization, like breaking tasks down and creating routines. And then, after you've done some CBT, doing coaching to continue these skills and meet individualized goals is something that people don't talk about enough. Also, many people find that medication is needed for one or both conditions. Stimulant medications like methylphenidate, I'm making sure that I'm saying that right, methylphenidate, yes, or amphetamines are used to treat ADHD. In someone with severe anxiety, a stimulant alone can sometimes ramp up those jitters. In fact, children and adults with ADHD and anxiety often do not respond as well to the ADHD medication unless the anxiety is also addressed. So, doctors go to the one ADHD medication that is a non-stimulant. Now, there is a different one, but that one also is a heart and blood pressure medication. This one is called atomoxetine, all right? And atomoxetine, or Strattera, is a non-stimulant form of a drug that it affects the norepinephrine in your brain, which influences dopamine. Doctors also may add another anti-anxiety medication to the mix, or they also might choose to add a tricyclic antidepressant or a mood stabilizer along with the ADHD medication if they choose to use a stimulant. There are a lot of options, which is why these disorders and these things need to be distinguished. And these 20-minute assessments, they gotta stop. I really wish everybody had access to a really long, huge evaluation and assessment on their psychological health, because the fact that I got that got me at least my first diagnosis, which was partially correct at least. When I finally did get to my full diagnosis that I do feel like describes me, it involves a self-diagnosis as well. And the ones that were diagnosed, they just changed a little bit in the way that they present as I got re-diagnosed. Now, if you're confused about what I'm talking about, when I first got diagnosed, it was with ADHD, inattentive type, and generalized anxiety disorder with panic and depression, right? My diagnosis now is ADHD, combined type of presentation, and general anxiety. That's it. I self-diagnose with being autistic because, well, I don't need the diagnosis for it. I know that I'm on the spectrum, and really, I know how to work with it. But that's just a little bit of an example and an anecdote of how I needed to have an 8-hour assessment, stay inpatient for almost 2 weeks in a hospital, and do a 2-week outpatient before and this was all spread apart. So this was within like 3 years from getting my first diagnosis to what I feel is my actual diagnosis and my treatment. So let me share a quick personal strategy with a dash of dark humor. I have that ADHD and anxiety, so my brain is basically an internet browser with 50 tabs open and 10 of them are frozen on a spinning wheel of doom. Those are the anxieties. One practical tip that helps me distinguish the two is writing down my racing thoughts. If I see worries like I'll probably get fired for sending that email typo dominating the page, or if I see something that's popping up again and again and again, I know it's the anxiety flaring. If the page is blank because I got distracted after one sentence, well, hello ADHD. Or if the page is just full of different random thoughts or things, hello ADHD and possibly anxiety. This silly little exercise helps me decide, do I need to do some calming techniques? Do I need to buckle down and use an ADHD strategy? Do I need to go for a walk to walk off some of this anxiety? Try it out. I'm telling you, knowledge is power and self-awareness is the key. A couple more tips for ADHD versus anxiety. When in doubt, ask what's driving the chaos. 1. What are the content of the thoughts? Racing mind specific worries are anxiety versus racing mind full of everything except what you want to focus on, ADHD. Physical symptoms. Physical symptoms. Anxiety often brings sweaty palms, racing heart, and tummy trouble. ADHD's restlessness isn't usually accompanied by fear, just boredom or impulsivity. So, if it's paired with fear, anxiety. If it's paired with boredom or impulsivity or something else, it's probably ADHD. Treatment approaches. For co-occurring cases, consider therapy, possibly a combo of medications, therapy, and coaching. Experts often treat the most important impairing symptom first. If panic attacks keep you homebound, address that alongside the ADHD. Conversely, untreated ADHD can actually fuel anxiety. Ever notice how missing deadlines and forgetfulness can make you feel more anxious? Ask me how I know. A balanced plan might be, say, a stimulant medication with some trauma therapy maybe and coaching, and possibly, some type of antidepressant, an SSRI, SNRI, or a tricyclic antidepressant, or a mood stabilizer might work. And all of those, working closely with the professionals to fine-tune this, can really help. All right, take a breath. Seriously, I'm not kidding. If you're holding it, breathing is good. Take a deep breath. I'll do it with you. We have tackled anxiety. Now, we're going to talk about the dark cloud that can sometimes follow ADHD, depression. When the cloud and the this is actually very catchy. ADHD and depression, when the chaos brings a cloud. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I do use ChatGPT sometimes to make things sound a little bit better, but it's all written in my own personality, honestly. And I have to write things down. I have to write my script before I read it. So if it does sound like I'm reading sometimes, I am. I can't remember all of these amazing things I want to share with you. Seriously, I have to write it down, and I have to have it typed out, like show notes, because people like show notes, apparently. All right, I've heard the people like show notes, and I've gotten reviews that it sounds like I'm reading. Well, then go listen to somebody else if you don't like the sound of me kind of reading. I can tell you that sometimes I do get distracted from the reading and I lose my space, so it's not always exactly what the show notes say, but I try to stay close enough because that's what people like. If you don't like something about the podcast and you want to leave me some feedback with some helpful, like, what could I do instead? That'd be great. But I really don't appreciate people, who just want to tell me that I sound terrible. Go listen to somebody else then. All right. Let's get back to what we were talking about. When the chaos brings the cloud. ADHD is often associated with being energetic, spontaneous, and even optimistic. Sure, I can start a new project at 2 a.m., no problem. So why do so many of us also struggle with depression? The reality is that living with unmanaged ADHD can be really, really hard. Imagine years of what Dr. Barkley calls developmental delay in executive function, always feeling one or 5 steps behind in managing life, despite trying just as hard or harder than your neurotypical peers. It's no surprise that 1 in 5 kids with ADHD also have a diagnosable depression. It's the studies, and they show anywhere from 8% to 55% of adults with ADHD have experienced a depressive disorder in their lifetime. Yes, that range is huge. It depends on how you define depression. But even on the low end, it's a lot. I'm one of the people on the high end. I got so far into a depressive disorder with the ADHD influencing it and the things that I was doing to unhealthily cope. I developed an auditory hallucination disorder. No, I'm not crazy. I mean, I am crazy, but I don't have schizophrenia, and I don't hallucinate things, but that's how bad it can get. Dr. Barkley himself notes that roughly 25% of people with ADHD will develop a significant depression by adulthood. In short, ADHD can come with a case of the blues, and not from the fun rhythm and blues kind, unfortunately. So, what does ADHD plus depression look like? Picture this. You've got a pile of unfinished projects, bills, laundry, the ADHD trail of crumbs. Initially, you shrug it off or maybe crack a joke. Unorganizational skills, who is she? But over time, the failures and the frustrations can chip away at your self-esteem. You start to feel helpless and even hopeless. Why bother trying? I'm just going to screw it up or forget again. That right there is the voice of depression sneaking in. ADHD impulsivity might also lead to regrettable decisions or conflicts that later you brood over. Another pathway to a depressed mood. In fact, the Attention Deficit Disorder Association points out that ADHD's impact on our lives, trouble with self-esteem, work or school difficulties, and strained relationships can contribute heavily to depression. It's like a 1-2 punch. ADHD creates problems. Those problems make you sad and feel defeated, which then makes it even harder to deal with the ADHD. And you just feel sad about it, because who wouldn't? Fun cycle, huh? Sorry, I like dark humor. If we don't laugh, we're going to cry, all right? Now, depression itself can mask as ADHD in some cases, especially in adults. Poor concentration, low motivation, fatigue, and social withdrawal. These can appear in major depression and look a lot like ADHD symptoms. If an adult walks into a doctor's office saying, I can't focus and I'm procrastinating a ton, a cursory eval might yield an ADHD diagnosis. But if that focus problem started only after, say, they lost a loved one, fell in a deep funk, that they also feel worthless or have a big sleep appetite changes, depression might be the primary culprit. But on the flip side, a person who had lifelong ADHD might be misdiagnosed as just depressed because they seem down or overwhelmed. As always, the timeline is again the key. ADHD usually starts in childhood. I mean, you have it when you're born. It's genetic, but it presents in early childhood, whereas depression often has more of a defined adult onset or teenage, depending on, the facts of life. Also, ask this question. Is the inability to focus present even when life is going good? If yes, ADHD is likely in the mix. If the focus issues wax and wane with mood, depression might be the driver. There's also some nuance. ADHD mood issues versus clinical depression. People with ADHD can have intense emotions and feel demoralized after a bad day. But often these feelings can lift if something positive happens. Say an exciting new interest appears and suddenly we have so much energy. Clinical depression is more persistent. Even good news might not cheer you up as much. As Dr. Thomas Brown emphasizes, ADHD includes difficulty regulating emotion. An ADHDer might suddenly feel anger or sadness that's intense, but then dissipates. By contrast, depression is a consistent low mood or loss of pleasure in things over weeks and months. Knowing this difference can be huge in sorting out what's going on. Now, how do we deal when we get the combo 1-2 punch? Good news. Many treatments for depression also help ADHD and vice versa. Therapy and coaching are prime examples. Related approaches can address negative thought patterns, I'm just a failure, and also help with practical skills for ADHD. Scheduling, or as I call it, tricking my brain into doing stuff on time. There are even specialized therapies for adults with ADHD that can blend mood and attention strategies. On the slow down. On the medication front, sometimes a single medication can pull double duty. One interesting option is Wellbutrin. I actually have been on this antidepressant before. It affects dopamine and norepinephrine, which can improve both depression and ADHD symptoms in some people. But there's a problem with this. There's a note that I want to say. Wellbutrin, now, it affects the dopamine and norepinephrine, whereas Strattera, it only affects the norepinephrine, which influences the dopamine. There's a difference, so it's not the same thing. There's also evidence that stimulant medication plus an antidepressant can be a powerful combo. Stimulants to improve concentration and strategy, antidepressants to lift mood. The problem is that there are several different kinds of stimulants that affect you differently. Ask me how I know. They usually try you on a bunch of different stuff. When you have all these comorbid disorders, it can sometimes feel like you're a guinea pig with these medications, okay? So when I'm talking about an example, I don't want you to take that as on God, okay? There's a lot of off-label medications. There are a lot of medications that when it says, a stimulant medication, there are 3 different types of stimulant medications, and they're coming out with new ones every day. Or when they say Strattera, the one non-stimulant made for ADHD, it's not the only one. There is another one, which I forgot the name of it because it's not written down in my show notes right now, but it's a different medication and it affects blood pressure and more so calms down the nervous system. So that would be something that would go with anxiety, right? A lot of antidepressants, SSRIs and SNRIs, don't work if you primarily have ADHD because we have enough serotonin. If we get too much serotonin, it actually makes the ADHD worse. I mean, it did for me, and it does for a lot of people. And most of the time, what happens is that we don't feel any effects from the SSRI, or it gives us negative effects. I will say SNRIs have a better chance of working because it is upping that norepinephrine, but it's also influencing serotonin. When we're talking about Strattera is also an SNRI, but the S doesn't stand for serotonin. It stands for selective. It's a selective norepinephrine reuptake drug. It is not influencing serotonin. I hope that sciencey jargon didn't get you lost, but it's just a little key side note that I wanted to touch on because a lot of people give up on medications because of the side effects. And I totally understand that these side effects can be super hard. Believe me, I've gotten a black box warning once. Thank God I knew what that was, how to recognize it, and stop taking it immediately. But these things can be very powerful and they can end up being a great tool to help you. Psychiatrists should tailor this to the individual. If someone is severely depressed and can't get out of bed, treating depression first may be the priority. If the depression seems secondary to ADHD struggles, improving ADHD could automatically boost mood. Often, it's a balancing act of treating both concurrently. Maybe starting an antidepressant and an ADHD med around the same time, or ensuring that therapy covers both bases or that the person's doing coaching. It's a big, long cycle, and it really is for all of the different disorders I'm really going to talk about, besides the learning disorders, but I don't want you to lose hope, because this isn't all gloom and doom, I promise. Because let's not forget about the lifestyle part of this. Sleep, exercise, nutrition, these all affect everything, especially ADHD and mood. Regular exercise, for example, can increase BDNF, a brain growth factor, and neurotransmitters that help both ADHD and depression. Personally, I found that when I finally started doing exercise routines, my mood swings evened out and my brain felt really a lot less foggy. I'm more motivated to do things. Of course, starting that routine required overcoming my ADHD inertia. Ask me how I know. It took me a few tries, maybe 20, but I did it, and you can too. A few other quick tips for ADHD versus depression. Check your joy meter. With ADHD alone, you can still feel happy or excited when something engaging happens. ADHD folks light up for interesting tasks. With depression, and even things you normally love barely register. If your favorite hobbies no longer spark any joy, that's a red flag for depression. Because let me just tell you something. I recently had a death in my family, and the way that I grieved was not acceptable, or it wasn't normal. Because guess what? Grief is not normal when you have ADHD. It's very nonlinear, and it looks weird. Because things that brought me joy, engaging things, still were interesting and brought me joy, even though I was depressed. Get it? All right. Next thing, all in your head. ADHD, negative thoughts sound like, I forgot again. I need a better system. Depression thoughts sound like, I forgot again because I'm a useless and I'm nothing and it will never change because I am a terrible person. Gotta listen to that self-talk. Depression is a sneaky little bully, but it can also go along with ADHD and self-criticism. So getting professional help, a thorough evaluation, can include psychological tests, questionnaires, even maybe an outpatient intensive type of thing to help them assess you to get the best diagnosis you can. I don't want to say the correct diagnosis because honestly, I feel like doctors have a really hard time getting it all correct. But for your treatment, it's a combined approach. Therapy, coaching, plus meds. It is all a mix of tools that can help you treat both conditions. And remember, addressing one often relieves the other a little bit. Improvement in your ADHD coping skills, you might start seeing hope instead of disappointment, boosting mood, or treat your depression and suddenly you have the energy to tackle the ADHD to-do list. Before we move on, one more important note. If you have ever had thoughts of self-harm or suicide, please reach out to a professional immediately. Depression is serious, and when it's compounded with ADHD and impulsivity, it can be dangerous. There is help, and you're not alone. I have been in your shoes. If you have ever thought about suicide, please seek help. So many of us have been in that dark place, and it can get better with the right support. I promise. Knowledge is power, and self-awareness is the key. Yes, but sometimes you also need a good therapist, a support group, possibly a stay in a hospital, and possibly medication to truly turn things around. And there's no shame in that game. All right. Take a deep breath. It's getting a bit heavy in here, so let's pivot to something a little bit different. A condition that seems like the opposite of ADHD in some ways, yet they can co-occur. OCD. And don't worry, we're going to crank that sass back up a notch because when you think of obsessive compulsive disorder, you might picture somebody who is extremely organized, checking the stove 10 times, everything neat and controlled. When you think ADHD, well, organized is not the first word that comes to mind, is it? ADHD is often messy, scattered, squirrel, shiny object. At first glance, ADHD and OCD sound like polar opposites. One is impulsive, the other is hyper-controlled. In fact, experts used to place ADHD's impulsivity and OCD's compulsivity in opposite ends of the spectrum. However, surprise, new research suggests that there may be a link between the two conditions. Turns out the brains of people with ADHD and those with OCD show similar patterns of activity and changes in certain areas. Who would have thought? It's a bit like discovering that your goofy, spontaneous friend and your uptight I can't say this word, and I don't know why. Methodical. There we go. Your uptight and methodical friends are actually cousins. Now, it's possible to have both ADHD and OCD. But how does that even work? Allow me to illustrate with a personal anecdote. I once spent an entire afternoon party perfectly organizing one shelf of my bookcase by color. OCD vibes, right? But the rest of my room looked like a tornado hit it. Classic ADHD. I fixated on that one shelf because it was calming to have one thing in order amidst the chaos. That's one way, just one way, that ADHD OCD can manifest. A person might have a few very specific obsessive routines or rituals, say needing their desk arranged just so, or turning the light on and off 3 times. If you've seen Ginny and Georgia, the newest season 3, Sam is a perfect example of this. While the broader picture of their life is disorganized, it sounds paradoxical, but many of us live it. Ask me how I know. I have color-coded to-do lists, but I often forget to look at them and I lose my keys about 3 times a day. Statistically, OCD is less common in ADHD folks than anxiety or depression, but it's still noteworthy. One 2020 study found that OCD may be more common in people with the hyperactive impulsive type of ADHD, and adults with both conditions in that study often had specific OCD symptoms, like obsessions with symmetry or hoarding behaviors. Interesting. Maybe the constant motor of hyperactive ADHD finds a channel into OCD rituals. It's an emerging area of research, so stay tuned as we learn more. Current neuroscience is still on it. Now, distinguishing from OCD and ADHD can be tricky, especially in kids, because both can lead to poor attention and poor performance, but for different reasons. An ADHD child might not finish classwork in time because they got distracted by everything. An OCD child might not finish because they were obsessing over getting that one answer exactly right or were mentally checking something over and over. Teachers might see both kids as not paying attention or working too slowly, and a classic misdiagnosis is put in when an OCD child is thought to have ADHD. For example, a kid who is constantly fiddling with objects might be doing so not out of ADHD boredom, but because of the obsessive-compulsive urge to do so. Say, those things align perfectly. Now, conversely, a child with ADHD hyperfocus or repetitive habits or repetitive behaviors, like doodling on the same dragon on every page, may be seen as OCD. Content is key. OCD comes with specific obsessions and compulsions, like repetitive behavior or mental acts done to reduce anxiety. ADHD repetitive behavior is usually just doing something a lot because it's stimulating, regulating, or fun. It's not to relieve an obsession. So here's another little neuroscience nugget. Some researchers theorize that shared circuitry might explain the overlap. Both ADHD and OCD involve frontostriatal circuits in the brain, basically the highway between the frontal lobes, planning and impulse control. The deeper structures, like the basal ganglia, habit and routine center, differences in these circuits and can yield ADHD symptoms if underachieved in certain ways, or symptoms of OCD if the overactive mind is in a rigid pattern. It's really complex, but the punchline in our brains are weird and wonderful. And somehow a glitch in one network can manifest as either impulsivity or compulsivity, or somehow both. I've seen this in people in my family. Maybe somebody like a parent or an aunt who possibly had ADHD as a child and still does, but also had OCD and used the OCD to basically combat the ADHD symptoms. So now everything is inconveniently always put away off surfaces, so there's never piles. We are always very early to events, and they have, running late anxiety, things like that. It's a very, very tricky wheel. That is why there is more research that needs to be done. So, how do you manage to roll the dice and get the uncommon pairing? Well, the approach has to be individualized. Therapy is crucial for this part, particularly exposure and response prevention for OCD, which gradually teaches you to resist compulsions and tolerate the anxiety. For example, not turning the light on and off 10 times, thinking that your whole family is going to die. There is a case study where adults with both ADHD and OCD took Ritalin, a stimulant, for their ADHD, and it actually helped reduce some OCD symptoms too. This is not guaranteed for everyone. Like I said, don't assume your ADHD meds will treat your OCD, but it shows how interconnected these conditions can be. Tweak one brain system and multiple issues improve. More research is definitely needed here. Calling all ADHD and OCD researchers. Quick tips. Thoughts versus impulses. ADHD obsessions are more like making intense interests, more like diving into hyperfocus on a hobby, for example, and we're usually not distressed by them until we've realized we've neglected other tasks. OCD obsessions are unwanted, intrusive thoughts that cause anxiety, like something terrible will happen if I don't do blank. It's a big emotional difference. Messy versus meticulous. If someone is extremely messy but also extremely particular about a few different things, example, only one specific type of pen can be used to write, or items must be at the exact symmetry, consider dual diagnosis. The messy part screams ADHD, and the oddly specific rule screams OCD. These folks do exist. I see you. I do. Side note, again, I also want to mention that autism, the thing we talked about some episodes ago, can also look like ADHD and OCD. So make sure that OCD, if you believe that you have OCD, you need to know the content, the thought versus the impulse, and get some professional differentiation. A clinician might use targeted questions or even assessments to tease these apart. They'll ask about motivations. Do you organize those books because it bothers you intensely if it's not perfect? OCD. Or because it's kind of fun and stimulating to do so you don't lose sleep if it's messy? ADHD. They might also trial medications very carefully. For instance, if OCD is severe, start an SSRI first and see how much the attention improves once the anxiety is down. Maybe add an ADHD medication if needed, or vice versa. If teamwork makes the dream work here, honestly, because when these two things co-occur, it's just a nightmare. All right, so we've covered so far mood disorders and OCD. Now, next, we are going to be talking about different learning differences, dyslexia and dyscalculia, which are super common sidekicks of ADHD. This one's for all the folks who, like me, have wondered, is it that I can't read this? Or I just got distracted 5 times in the middle of the sentence? Why do I run into things all the time? Things like that. We will jump into those right after a word from our sponsor. Hey there. If you're looking for a game changer in managing your ADHD, let me tell you about something that's made a huge impact on my life. Focused, the adult ADHD group coaching program by Kristen Carter. This isn't just another program. It's a community. It's a roadmap. it's a lifeline for adults with ADHD who want to thrive. Inside of Focus, you'll find weekly coaching calls with Kristen packed with actionable insights, a supportive community of adults who get it. They get what it's like to live with ADHD. You'll get tools and strategies that actually work for our brains. No fluff, just real results. I've been a part of Focus for over a year, and let me tell you, it's where I've learned so much of what I share with you on Authentically ADHD. It's been a game changer for me, and I think it could be for you too. And here's the best part. If you use my link to join, we both save money. It's a win-win. So if you've been looking for the right ADHD support, this is your sign to check it out. Head to the link in my show notes to learn more and sign up. Let's thrive together with tools and support that we need to succeed. Are you also loving what we're doing on Authentically ADHD but want to take your experience to the next level? Well, I have got something for you. Introducing the Authentically ADHD Patreon, your VIP pass to the ultimate ADHD support hub. As a Patreon member, you'll unlock exclusive perks like early access to every single episode, hear it before anyone else does, a treasure trove of resources that I've made, tools, guides, and worksheets to help you thrive in everyday aspects of life, direct coaching opportunities with me designed to help you harness your ADHD powers, and the cherry on top, an incredible community of like-minded individuals who just get it. You're not alone on this journey, and together we can be unstoppable. By joining Patreon, you're not just supporting the podcast, you're fueling a movement. Together, we're breaking stigmas, embracing authenticity, and creating a world where ADHD is seen as a strength and not just a struggle. So what are you waiting for? Head over to patreon.com/authenticallyADHD and join the family today. Let's keep growing, thriving, and showing up authentically together. Hope to see you over there. Back to the show. All right, so we're going to continue with some of the learning disorders that can go along with ADHD, dyslexia, and dyscalculia. We're going to take a step back from the mood disorders, and we'll hop back in when we talk about bipolar disorder. But ADHD can make school and learning challenging just by itself. Missed homework, daydreaming in class, losing the pencil you just had in your hand. But sometimes it's not just ADHD. Many of us also have specific learning disorders alongside ADHD, like dyslexia, a reading disorder, or dyscalculia, a math and numbers disorder. In fact, ADHD is the most common neurodevelopmental condition to co-occur alongside dyslexia. Between 25% and 40% of people with one of these conditions also have the other. Some estimates for children are even higher, depending on the definitions. Up to 50% of kids with ADHD also have a learning disability of some kind. So if you're thinking, wow, I have ADHD and I've always struggled with reading, maybe I'm just bad at it, consider that you may have a hidden dyslexia all along. Knowledge is power, and identifying it can be a game changer. Let's break them down real quick. Dyslexia affects reading and language processing. A person who has dyslexia might have trouble decoding words, spelling, or reading fluently, even though they're just as smart as their other peers. Dyscalculia is similar, but with math. Trouble understanding quantities, symbols, performing calculations, remembering math facts, and this also includes spatial awareness. This dyscalculia connects with spatial awareness in our surroundings. So not being able to estimate, how far that wall away is before you walk into it. Now, ADHD, of course, can cause academic issues too, but for different reasons. The tricky part is, on the surface, ADHD and learning disorders produce similar outcomes. Low grades, difficulty reading or doing math, or both, trouble following instructions, so misdiagnosis or delayed diagnosis is common. A child might get diagnosed with ADHD because they can't sit still and finish their reading assignments, when in reality, dyslexia was making reading a nightmare, and the child acted out or tuned out, appearing to be ADHD out of frustration. Conversely, a child might carry a dyslexia diagnosis when actually it was ADHD all along, causing them to skip lines or lose focus while reading, so their basic reading ability is fine. One key differentiator: if the errors or difficulties are very specific to one area, suspect a learning disorder. For example, an ADHD-only kid might read poorly because they skip lines or they rush, but they can decode words when they are focused. A dyslexic kid, even on their best focusing day, will struggle with sounding out words, reading pseudo words, or spelling in a way that doesn't make sense phonetically. Similarly, an ADHD kid may bomb a math test because they made careless mistakes or forgot to turn in the page, but if you re-administer it orally or one-on-one, they actually understand the concepts. A dyscalculic kid, on the other hand, may truly not comprehend the quantities or the operations even when they're paying full attention. Proper psychoeducation testing by a psychologist can isolate these skills and find out what's really going on, which is how I know that I have dyscalculia. It's also worth noting that ADHD and learning disorders feed off of each other. ADHD can exacerbate a learning disorder. Imagine having dyslexia and ADHD. Reading is hard due to dyslexia, and ADHD makes it hard to work through all the other challenges because you get distracted and discouraged easily. That poor kid might avoid reading altogether, falling further behind, which could be misinterpreted as, see, ADHD makes them lazy and they don't want to do it. Vice versa, a learning disorder can exacerbate ADHD symptoms. A child with undiagnosed dyslexia might appear severely inattentive in language arts class simply because the letters on the page might as well be hieroglyphics on the page. Since they can't engage with the material, their ADHD circuits go wandering. The older theory even speculated that some kids labeled as ADHD were actually primarily dyslexic. Their reading difficulty led to inattention. Recent studies suggest it's more often both. Common cognitive processes like working memory and processing speed, and even genes, both underlie ADHD and dyslexia. So these conditions often travel together, not just by coincidence, but due to shared roots in the brain's development. Let me tell you a quick story about how this whole thing, how it doesn't make sense for me specifically. How I realized that I didn't have dyslexia, I had dyscalculia, and that my excelled reading, let's just call it hyperverbalism as a child, meaning I spoke early and I spoke a lot. I was reading by the age of 4, and that was not only due to me teaching myself about words and letters, but first by memorizing what was on the page. That did not have anything to do with any type of learning disability. Those things that happened early in childhood for me, a person who has primarily ADHD, but who's also on the autistic spectrum, autistic girls usually tend to be hyperverbal. They tend to read early. So some of these things can also exacerbate life and make it way more confusing and harder to untangle all of these things. So what do we do about it? There's one more straightforward. You treat each problem with its respective solution. You accommodate both. For ADHD, behavioral strategies, medication if appropriate, classroom accommodations like movement breaks or extra time. For dyslexia and dyscalculia, specialized instruction, structured literacy program like the Orton-Gillum for dyslexia, or specific multisensory math programs for dyscalculia, plus accommodations like audiobooks, speak-to-text, and a calculator or formula sheet for dyscalculia, etc., etc. If you only treat the ADHD and ignore the learning disorder, the person will continue to struggle no matter how organized they become. If you only focused on the learning disorder and ignore the ADHD, they might know how to do the skill, but still forget how to apply it or lose their homework. So a combined approach is essential. From a personal perspective, discovering a learning disorder late can be both a relief and a what-if moment. I had always thought I was just bad at math because I'd zone out when numbers came up, and no amount of rereading the problem made it click. It wasn't until adulthood, about when I learned about dyscalculia and went, oh, it wasn't just paying attention. My brain actually processes numbers differently. Mind blown. I was never officially diagnosed, but knowing about it changed how I approached math and gave me a little bit of solace in the reasons why I trip over things and run into things all the time. So I'm not calling myself stupid for mixing up the numbers 56 and 65 anymore. So, that's what it gave me. A diagnosis, you don't always need that. So if any of this resonates, consider an evaluation or just more research. It's never too late. Adults can get diagnosed with learning disorders too and adapt their strategies accordingly. Knowledge is, say it with me, power, and self-awareness is the key. So let's talk about telling them apart. Quick tips. Scope of difficulty. ADHD will make learning in general harder, while a specific learning disability, dyslexia or dyscalculia, make specific problems harder, like math or reading. ADHD is actually called a non-specific learning disorder. Dyscalculia and dyslexia are specific learning disorders, meaning they affect a specific part of the brain. ADHD is non-specified because it affects all parts of the brain. Consider error patterns, careless, inconsistent errors across the board. Lean ADHD. Consistent patterned errors, always mix up B and D, or always misreading place values and numbers, lean towards brain or learning disorder. Testing and school support. Request a full educational evaluation too. Request one from the school, and request one from a doctor, a psychologist. This is, if you're a parent and you want to do this for your child, from my experience as a special education teacher, that is your right. When you ask for something like that to be done, the school has 30 business days to get back to you. They have 90 days to complete the assessment, and they have about, I think it's 6 months, but it has to be before the end of the year to catch you up on everything and give you the outcome. It's your right. Call and tell them what you want. They have to do it at the schools. Now, getting a private neuropsychologist to do a comprehensive, that you can bring to the school and they can't refute it. When you have both, if the school is willing to work with the IEP and 504 plan with the doctor, that's like the ideal. For example, the plan might say extra time on tests, use of assistive text-to-speech technology, seating at the front, shorter homework assignments, movement breaks, a combo of remediation to improve skills, and accommodation to bypass weakness is ideal. And for adults, you don't have to be shy about using tools. I use audiobooks, calendar reminders, calculators. These aren't crutches. I even use FMLA time at work. They're supports. The goal is to let your strength shine by easing the chokehold of your challenges. Whew. Don't worry, we're almost done with this tour of the ADHD's common tag-alongs. Last but very certainly not least, we need to address the big one that often causes confusion: bipolar disorder. This one's heavy and often misdiagnosed one way or the other with ADHD, so we're going to shed some light here. Also, I want to thank you for hanging in for some of these longer episodes. Do you understand now why I did ADHD and autism all by itself? So, untangling the mood roller coaster. If ADHD is a roller coaster of spur-of-the-moment distractions and emotions, bipolar disorder is more like having a scheduled roller coaster. Big hills or manic or hypomanic episodes and deep valleys, depressive episodes that come in cycles. To the untrained eye, a person in a bipolar or manic phase, very talkative, racing thoughts, little need for sleep, impulsivity, and very risky behavior, jumping from task to task, it can look a lot like somebody who can't concentrate and is acting recklessly. No wonder clinicians sometimes scratch their heads and say, is it ADHD? Is it bipolar? Is it both? In fact, about 20% of people with ADHD may show symptoms of bipolar disorder at some point, and many with bipolar disorder have ADHD-like symptoms early on, complicating things further. Co-occurrence is not the norm, but it's high enough to be significant. So how do we tell them apart? I love how psychiatrist Dr. Po Wang puts it. The biggest difference between the two disorders is that ADHD is persistent, while the mood fluctuations in bipolar are episodic. In simpler terms, ADHD is always there to some degree. It's chronic, and it's also worth noting that ADHD and these conditions that you're born with, it affects you pretty much daily. Bipolar disorder, on the other hand, is characterized by episodes of mood extremes that break from a person's usual baseline. ADHD is like background noise, sometimes louder, sometimes quieter, but never completely gone. Bipolar is like occasional intense music blasting on an otherwise normal station. For example, a child with ADHD, attentive and hyper every day in all sorts of situations. A teenager with bipolar might be mostly fine for months, then have a 2-week bout of ragey energy, grandiose ideas and no sleep, and then crash out into a depression afterwards. If you take a snapshot during that high period, it looks a lot like ADHD, plus an extra flavoring of grandiosity maybe. But if you zoom out, you see the normal functioning in between the episodes of mania and hypomania, which ADHD doesn't really have unless it's influenced by major depressive disorder or something else. Mood is another differentiator. ADHD does involve mood swings. We call it emotional impulsivity or dysregulation. But these are typically brief, minutes to hours, and tied to external triggers. Example, you have a meltdown because you're frustrated because you misplaced your keys again, but you recover later that day when something else grabs your attention. Bipolar swings can last days, weeks, or even months, and often come out of the blue, or they're super out of proportion. Someone with ADHD may say, I feel very strongly, and I feel everything very strongly, but I can shift out of a mood if something changes. Someone in a bipolar manic episode can't just snap out of it. The elevated mood or irritable mood is persistently there, often with no obvious immediate cause, and it impairs their judgment. They may do wildly risky things and like huge spending sprees, driving recklessly, or having unsafe sexual activity. Also, bipolar mania usually hits features you don't see in ADHD. Euphoria or extreme irritability that's beyond the occasional ADHD outburst, possible delusions, grandiose thinking. I started a company at 2 a.m. and I'm sure I'll become a millionaire by next week. And decreased need for sleep without feeling tired. ADHD folks can pull an all-nighter, hello hyperfocus, but right afterwards, the next day, we're feeling it like a hangover. A person in mania may sleep 3 hours a night for a week and still be buzzing with energy. There's even a mnemonic that some clinicians use. ADHD is like having a Ferrari engine with bicycle brakes. Fast thoughts and actions, weak impulse control all the time. Whereas bipolar means the whole car, occasionally turns into a rocket ship and then into a turtle, then back to the car. Age of onset also helps. ADHD is always there. Bipolar typically starts in late adolescence or early adulthood. It is very uncommon, although not impossible, for young kids to have true bipolar disorder. When they do, it's often not severe. Studies suggest that having both may lead to more challenging course. Earlier onset of bipolar, more frequent mood episodes, and sometimes greater life impairment. It makes sense, though. Unmanaged ADHD can add stress and chaos that may trigger mood episodes, and bipolar mood swings can wreak havoc on the structure of someone with ADHD that they really need. Let's talk treatment for this duo because it has a crucial sequence. Most experts, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, agree that when ADHD and bipolar coexist, you treat the bipolar disorder first. Why? Because bipolar, especially mania, can be extremely dangerous. There's risk of impulse harm, spending savings, delusions, etc. And the other part of this is the depression part of bipolar disorder can also lead to suicide. Also, stimulant medications used for ADHD can sometimes exacerbate mania, even if given before the mood is stable. So, mood stabilization is step 1, typically using mood stabilizers like lithium or valproate, or an atypical antipsychotic medication that is used to control mania or hypomania. And often psychotherapy as well. Only once the person's mood is relatively stable do doctors cautiously introduce ADHD medication if it's needed. There are cases where mood stabilizers alone improve focus because when you're not swinging mood-wise, it's easier to concentrate. But often ADHD symptoms persistent and they need their own treatment. Non-stimulant options like atomoxetine or guanfacine, that was the other name, might be considered if stimulants seem too risky. But stimulants can be used carefully under monitoring. Now, if bipolar is misdiagnosed as ADHD, for example, someone's actually bipolar and we pump them full of Adderall thinking it was ADHD, the result can be pretty bad. The stimulant might trigger a manic or mixed episode, making things worse. Now, if ADHD is misdiagnosed as bipolar, which happens quite a bit, someone might be put on a hefty, heavy duty of bipolar meds unnecessarily. Then dealing with the side effects and stigma without any benefit. So, getting this right is really important. This happened to me for a little while, and it also happened to Mr. Williams, Mr. Tell Williams, Mr. Pre-K Pause. I don't know if you know of him or not. He's on social media. He's a teacher. He's a therapist. But he was misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder for like 10 years. And the medications they put him on made him gain so much weight. Like, it was ridiculous. All right, let me add a little bit of humor to lighten this heavy topic. One might joke that ADHD is like having Netflix with 100 shows to choose from and you keep changing them, whereas bipolar is having 2 shows on that take over your entire screen at different times. One is a frenetic game show, mania, and the other one is a slow, dark commentary, depression. And if you have both ADHD and bipolar, well, you're flipping through Netflix while 2 of those channels are trying to autoplay in the background. It's chaotic, but with proper help, you can learn how to manage. So, I have a close family member diagnosed with both, and once the bipolar was treated, the improvement in ADHD was just remarkable. It's day and night. So, quick tips. ADHD versus bipolar. Timeline check. ADHD in childhood. Bipolar, symptoms typically start and onset of later on in life. Teen or adulthood. Next, symptom duration. ADHD mood shifts very, very fast, related to the events. Instant frustration or excitement fades. Bipolar mood shifts are sustained, last weeks, days, or months, and the mood episodes of bipolar are often mistaken for each other, but clearly are not the same. Get a diagnosis and get it right. This is also, I'm just going to stop giving this tip. I'm just going to say, if you believe that you have co-occurring conditions like these that are very, very hard to distinguish between, you're going to need more than 15 minutes with a regular, any kind of doctor, honestly. You're going to need a full evaluation. You're going to need to get the right diagnosis, to get the right treatment, because it involves integrated treatment. You need to find a psychiatrist who really understands both, because treatment will likely involve a mood stabilizer, atypical, antipsychotic, plus ADHD meds and therapy and coaching. Some newer research indicates that treating ADHD after mood stability can improve overall outcomes for people, as long as it's done carefully. We have gone through a gallery of ADHD's common co-stars. Now, as we wrap up, let's zoom out and arm you with some general strategies for navigating this maze of co-occurring conditions. I know we've covered a lot. I think this episode is over an hour. Actually, I'm pretty sure it is already. So we're going to kind of fly through these tips pretty quickly because they are actionable strategies to distinguish what's what and to ensure that treatment is hitting all the targets. Don't worry, in the show notes, there will be a description under each one. Number 1, get a comprehensive evaluation. I really can't stress this enough. I've said it a lot of times. That's just it. Get a comprehensive evaluation, demand it. It's your right. Be your own advocate. That's how I had to do it, and sometimes that's just how it has to be done. 2, track the timeline and your triggers. Sit down with family, if possible, or like friends, and sketch out when each symptom emerged and what influenced them. It'll really help you to help the doctor to tease out and distinguish between diagnoses. It also builds self-awareness. You'll start to notice and say, when I haven't slept, this happens because of my ADHD hyperfocus, my anxiety the next day is through the roof, and connect those dots. Number 3, educate yourself. Right now, you're doing this because you're listening to a podcast about ADHD. Get more reliable resources. It's called selective Googling. Use ChatGPT and use specific prompting if you're asking questions. Use and learn about each condition from reliable sources, books by experts like Dr. Barkley or Dr. Thomas or the ADHD Love Couple. Reputable websites such as CHAD, Attitude, and the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. Not to become a hypocritic or whatever, I don't know what the word would be, but to become an informed self-advocate, all right? That's what you need to be. Current neuroscience is still evolving. For instance, knowing that you have ADHD and OCD can share brain circuit patterns, or ADHD and dyslexia have overlapping cognitive deficits, can validate your experiences. You're not just making excuses, and you don't just have ADHD. This can also help the doctor when you're telling them these things. Number 4, prioritize your interventions and don't try to tackle everything at once. It can be really overwhelming to manage, and if you try to fix all things all at once, you're going to burn out and shut down. Triaging here is key. 5, integrated treatment plan. Ensure that whatever your diagnosis is, your treatment plan is based upon your whole self. Coordinate between professionals if you have a team. Try to get a team, a therapist, a psychiatrist, and a coach all willing to work together. Lifestyle tweaks that can cover all the bases. The beautiful thing is that some lifestyle changes have multiple conditions. Sleep, for instance, is foundational. So is exercise and nutrition. So we all benefit from mindfulness. We all benefit from exercise, a better diet, and from getting enough sleep. Think of these as a buy one, get one free, because whether you have a second diagnosis or not, it's going to help. 7, lean on your support systems. Yes, that was an intentional pause because it's important, and I'm going to say it again. Lean on your support systems. You don't have to do this alone. Support groups are available online or in person, local groups for mental health. Connect you with people who get it. Sometimes hearing "me too" is the best therapy. For parents, connecting with other parents of kids who have learning disorders like ADHD or other things can really help you learn about the challenges or mood disorders. Then the parents can provide much needed commiseration and strategies. Educators should collaborate with parents and school psychologists to create uniform plans for the children. Or for the adult, the doctors and whoever. Consistency between home and school for the kids. And number 8, last but definitely not least, self-compassion and humor. Yes, this is a strategy. Managing ADHD with extra conditions can be tough, and there will be days where you feel like you're failing at everything. Cut yourself from some freaking slack, please. You are actually juggling more than the average person, even if it might not look that way externally. all right? So when it's appropriate, try to find humor in your situation. I mean, if I didn't laugh at myself that I got so hyper focused on organizing a drawer that I forgot to eat all day and then cried because I was hangry, I just cry without laughing. That's all I would do. And laughing is more fun. Embrace your quirks. They make you you. One of my signature catchphrases on this show is ask me how I know, precisely because I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, probably stained it with coffee, but still. Humor is healing, and it can help you stay resilient. As we come to the end of this episode, remember this. Having ADHD plus something else isn't a sign that you're broken or too much to handle. It actually makes sense biologically. Brains are complicated. And if one circuit is wired differently, causing ADHD, others often are too. Many of the great minds and creatives have had multiple neurodivergence or mental health challenges. It's part of what made them unique and powerful. The key is self-awareness and proactive management. The more you understand your body and brain system, the better you can advocate for yourself and find out what strategies in sports allow you to thrive. Before I sign off, let's do a quick recap of our signature sayings because repetition is ADHD's best friend, right? Knowledge is power and self-awareness is the key. You've taken the time to learn about your ADHD and its common tag-alongs. That knowledge will serve in you finding what works for you. And always remember to stay true to yourself throughout this journey. That's all I have for now. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, navigating through these winding roads of ADHD and co-occurring conditions. I hope you found this episode enlightening, validating, and maybe even chuckle-worthy at times. If you think somebody may benefit from it, send it on over to them or share it to your socials. I'd love to see it. Make sure you tag me at AuthenticallyADHD_podcast so I can give you a huge virtual hug. Stay authentic, and we will talk soon.